Hey everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of the Better Bidding series. So last week we started on the left-hand side, or what BBO represents as kind of like the bottom half of the convention card. So we spoke about the different types of doubles. Obviously your basic ones: negative, responsive, maximals, to be able to differentiate between an invite and just like a pure competitive bid. Support doubles and redoubles, and then I spoke about Snapdragon. There's other types of doubles that obviously can fit into this box, but I think those are the ones that you do want to cover if you absolutely can on the card. Talking about no trump overcalls. So with the balancing, we play a wider range, and we spoke about how range statement can come in effect, or can come in handy to basically handle such a wide range, where you can easily differentiate between your minimum balancing no trump bids and your heavier ones. Went through overcalls and just talked about handling interference there, namely kind of like how we talked about transfers earlier after a major suit double. Did the same after a major suit overcall, and the different ways of showing raises, because you have now 3 bids available with a Cuebid of their suit. Then we went through a defense against no trump. I went with multi-landy. I even mentioned that I don't think penalty doubles against strong no trumps are necessarily crazy. Obviously, when I think I first did this series, I would have thought that was psychotic because, again, one hand's opening a strong no trump, the other hand's doubling for penalty. Where are the points? There aren't too many left to be had. But I'll just cite a short track record of a lot of success when that bid has come up. So as long as you're careful with what you double with, it might be worth investing in. All right, so in this week's episode, I'm not sure if we're going to get through all this, but we're certainly going to cover this portion at least, and we'll see where we wind up. As I mentioned, the goal was to finish the series before Thanksgiving, and so we are right on track for that, because I do want to do like a general review episode at the end as well, kind of like where we just review everything. So timing-wise, I think we're right on track. All right, so what do we got for starters? Okay, I don't think there's too much to talk about with jump overcalls. I think this is obviously weak. I mean, I know there's different styles that you can play in different seats, but I think that's relatively straightforward. I don't play anything too fancy there. Preempting style. Obviously, my preempting style is, I think, as people have kind of like figured out through this series and just me mentioning it, I'm usually a little more conservative than others. You know, where I preempt on hands where that people would open, and there's hands I pass that people are like, how are you not preempting? And I'm not a big 5-card preempter at the 2 level, all these sorts of things. So usually the boxes I check off here, I think vulnerable. You definitely want to be sound. Of course, maybe third seat, maybe you stretch it a little more, but I don't think you want to get too frisky necessarily vulnerable. And then non-vulnerable, of course, I mean, you can go with light. If you and your partner are prepared to be able to handle, like, these really crazy preempts, you can even go for very light, but I'm usually just kind of like a down-the-middle person when it comes to that stuff. All right, Cuebids. Okay, so obviously most people are going to play direct Cuebids as Michaels. And that would go for both majors and minors. So 1 club, 2 clubs is majors, 1 diamond, 2 diamonds is majors, and so on and so forth. I am not against, and I've been playing this for a few years and hasn't really backfired too much, but what I would say is I'm okay with playing 2 clubs as natural after 1 club. And that's after, obviously against precision, you might play some, well, if you're not, of course you have mathy, but you can certainly play different types of conventional bids. Or if you're playing short club where 1 club is 2+, then I think there's even a stronger incentive to have something like that in place. But even against your normal 1 club opening, just because there is a fair percentage of the time that is a 3-card suit, to be able to get a natural club overcall in is not necessarily a bad thing, because it could actually be your fit. And, handling a split like that isn't necessarily a crazy thing. So what I play in those situations is I play 1 club, by the opponents, and a direct Cuebid of 2 clubs being natural. You do have to alert that. Because, typical interpretation is minor, so you do have to announce that, even though it is technically a Cuebid, but it's not a Cuebid in this sense because it's natural. And then when you have both majors, you bid 2 diamonds. So you give up the 2 diamond preempt over 1 club, which, again, isn't a crazy loss. You can either just overcall 1 diamond, or you can, ramp it up a little bit and jump to 3. So you still have your Michaels involved there, but you have the ability to bid 2 clubs as natural, which I do think is useful. So what I'm going to say here is I'm going to say 1 club, 2 clubs as natural, and then 1 club, 2 diamonds as Michaels. So we still do have Michaels, it's just not a direct Cuebid though in this situation. Over a 1 diamond opening, I think you still do want to play Michaels because, you know, very high percentage of the time that's at least a 4 card suit. So to be able to bid naturally in that situation is a little more risky. Against a precision 1 diamond, I think it should be a similar type of defense where you play 2 diamonds as natural, and then you play 2 hearts as Michaels. And some people play 2 hearts as like your weaker Michaels, and then 3 diamonds as stronger Michaels. Because of course some people do play, you know, like mini maxi style when it comes to Michaels in those situations, so you can better differentiate between the bad and the good. Also one just kind of like side note worth mentioning in those situations, at least with like the 1 diamond 2 diamonds I was referring to, the best way to show like a limit raise in that situation is to queue 3 clubs. So 3 clubs isn't natural even though they never bid it. That's kind of like your way to show, hey, I actually have a good raise for your diamonds here. So you just kind of give up on that and just commit to that suit instead. Over to majors, Michaels is obviously in full effect. Unless they're playing some crazy system, you still want to play it there. So I'll check off that box. This box I usually check off too, even though there's kind of like this added point to it, because you do still play it for half of it. It'd be nice if they actually had 3 possibilities here. So that you can check all those boxes off. I guess you actually kind of have that. I guess you can do this too. That works. I don't know. I'm not an expert at filling out a card, or an expert at anything for that matter. I was going to think of something to say afterwards, but then I realized, no, I don't got it. I don't got it, Chief. Okay. Anyways, moving forwards. So those are the direct Cuebids. Another one that has come up, and I hadn't started playing this, and I wouldn't even say I've really played it yet because it actually hasn't come up in a live bridge game. But one thing that I have started toying with because of a partner who recommended it to me, and I actually had, you know, kind of been familiar with it before. But it's also in the situations where it's not a direct Cuebid, but still when you're interfering in the auction. Like let's say for example the auction goes like a club on your left, and then it goes pass and no trump. Now, is 2 clubs going to be natural? Is 2 clubs supposed to be natural here? The reason why maybe it shouldn't be is because they opened at least a 3 card suit, right? And the 1 no trump bidder, and this isn't just necessarily over a no trump, but I'm just giving a good example. The 1 no trump bidder is already implying that they have the minors because they don't have a 4 card major. So when you've limited your cards, you usually have X number of clubs. So to bid clubs naturally in this auction when partner's going to be short isn't necessarily as wise. So what you can do, and the way you can handle this, is you can actually play 2 different types of kind of like Michaels in this situation, where you play 2 clubs as a 5-4 Michaels, and then 2 diamonds as like your classical 5-5. So you have the ability to show a 5-4 hand, which you don't really in many other situations unless you lie about your Michaels. So it is nice to have that. The other reason this comes in handy is because, you know, sometimes you'd be able to overcall at the 1 level. But now that you don't have that ability, you know, you want to be able to have a way to show both suits, which I think makes that very important. So basically with that, you know, 2 club bid where it's 5-4, 2 diamonds is basically, you know, no preference. You know, bid your actual longest major, and then, you know, with 2 diamonds when it shows 5-5, you have a little clearer direction on which way to go. So I do think that's worth playing. You know, maybe you play it after any kind of like 1 minor something sequence. Maybe it's just after a no trump, but just based on the frequency of having a natural suit in those situations, that's the reason for it. I feel like it's more likely to be natural in the direct seat when, you know, opener's hand is a little more kind of like unlimited. But when they've kind of like shown their hand within various constraints, then I think that is an important piece of information to take into account. And that would just be after natural. I think after, you know, kind of like a short diamond, or, well, a precision diamond, for example, you wouldn't play that. Because you would still play what I just said over a 1 diamond opening bid as well. Like 1 diamond pass and no trump. For the same reason, you know, where this person is implying clubs. So 2 clubs should be kind of like 5-4 and 2 diamonds should be 5-5. Okay, so I guess that's an indirect Cuebid, but there is no place to put that on the card, so I thought it was just worth bringing up. All right, over opponent's takeout double. So the way I usually check this box off, and keep in mind, of course, that we had already discussed that we play transfers in a situation where it goes a major double. Usually the way I approach this is that a new suit is, forcing at the 1 level. I guess you could even say it's technically at the 2 level if you're in a transfer, but if not, if it's not a transfer situation, then you shouldn't check that box. Redoubling typically implies no fit, because usually if I do have a fit, I go about it, well, I would say especially in the majors. I would go about it through some type of transfer. Even though I said like a major double, 2 major -1, I said that was like a constructive raise. You could make that unlimited in that sense, where it's constructive or better. So, your partner's obviously forced to bid, and then you can bid more at that point to show the bigger hand in that case. And then I play Jordan 2 no trump after both the minors and the majors. You can play, if you and your partner have the agreement, you could play, kind of like your minor raise. Well, I wouldn't say like 2 diamonds or like 2 minor being inverted, but you could still play, I guess, your crisscross and your mixed raises after 1 diamond double or 1 minor double. But I think having Jordan is more straightforward. And the way some of my partners and I play it with the major suit Jordan is that we actually would still play our normal kind of like Jacoby responses, where 3 clubs shows a min, because of course you're not really giving up any room in the situation, and then going through like the responses shows something extra, just way to better clarify where the hand belongs, because especially with the way people double sometimes, who knows what's still on the table at this point. And then for opening preempts, we are moving through this quickly. Maybe we are actually going to get to the slam bidding, just speaking to myself here. So for opening preempts, usually you'll see here like takeout through 4 major, so you could play it through 4 hearts, or you could play it through 4 spades as well. I think 4 spades, obviously, maybe it's a takeout oriented double, but you're not necessarily going to always pull, because there are situations where you're just kind of like stuck with nothing and partners doubling 4 spades, and perhaps the best medicine you can take is just passing and taking -790 or something like that, as opposed to bidding and going for worse. I can speak from experience from somebody who's gone through some telephone numbers in trying to bid in those situations, but sometimes it's best to leave an auction alone if it just feels like the next outcome is going to be worse in those situations. And the partner has that moose where you are supposed to bid, you are probably going to beat that bid anyway, is what I would say. So I'll say takeout through 4 spades, but it's more of a suggestive takeout rather than, you absolutely need to take this out in the 4 spade case. Maybe not as much with 4 hearts, because you still have the ability to bid 4 spades. And then, since we're talking about opening preempts here, there is an important point to make with the Lebensal 2-no response. When we first recorded this series, I spoke about how, having the Lebensal there to be able to differentiate between like weak and stronger hands is really important. So just a similar principle to what you would play after kind of like no trump interference. You start with 2 no trump if it's like 2 major double, and then you essentially bid 2 no trump to convey a weak hand, where partner is forced to bid 3 clubs, and then you correct or you pass, and then if you bid directly at the 3 level, that shows a better hand. That is useful, because partner whose hand is unlimited as a doubler has a better idea of what to take your hand for, and now they can know whether to move on in the auction or just pass, because otherwise if you give them like a 15 or 16 count, they're kind of stuck. They don't know what you have. So if you can better specify your range, that comes in handy. What has gained a lot more traction over the last few years, and maybe it actually is just within the last few years, where I hadn't really even heard of it before when I was doing this series the first time, is what we would call better minor Lebensal. And this just applies in the 2 no trump case with the preempt double, not after like no trump interference. But the idea here is that instead of as always bidding 3 clubs, partner or the doubler bids their better minor. So the idea here is and this actually, I actually remember this coming up on a hand with a partner of mine in Reno, which was a national 3 years ago, where they made a takeout double of a preempt, and I'm sitting there with like 4-4 in the minors, and I think I bid 2 no and then passed 3 clubs, and we played our 7-card fit as opposed to our 8-card diamond fit. So the idea with this is with the doubler bidding their better minor, because a fair majority. Well, I wouldn't say a fair majority, but a decent number of decent amount of the time, it's usually a minor that you're running out to after kind of like 2 major double. Having that in place comes in handy because now you are gonna find your better fit if the like advancer didn't have a super long suit themselves. So it is it can come in handy because you do find a better fit sometimes. So I guess just on the idea of falling, not necessarily falling flat on your face, being able to land on your feet is a reason to play something like better minor Lebensall. So I'm going to check this off. There isn't really a good place to write that here because there's no convention card that really accommodates that yet. But I think that is important to keep in mind. So just as a refresher, so in this 2 major doubles sequence, 2 no trump is asking partner to bid their better minor than necessarily just a relay to 3 clubs. So if you were going to sign off afterwards, you still just, kind of like bid as normal. But otherwise, you can just pass partner's bid, and that's your way to get out in those situations. The other thing worth talking about with the preempts, because there really isn't a better place to put it, although I guess it's not necessarily over a double, but just playing Leaping Michaels. So Leaping Michaels, of course, comes into play where you can just jump after a preempt to show kind of like a 2-suiter. So the classic example is after 2 major, where you jump to 4 minor to show, at least 5 cards in the other major, and then 5 cards in whichever minor you're jumping to, whether it's 4 clubs or 4 diamonds. So that's one situation. That's your classic example of Leaping Michaels. And the idea here, or at least for some people, of course, not everybody plays it this way, is, one thing to note with Leaping Michaels, by the way, since you're forcing partner to at least a 4 level and potentially game, you have to have a good hand to do so. This isn't like your classic Michaels where this can be kind of like open season. No, this is a really good hand. Some people would play kind of like just Cuebidding the major directly as a weaker form of Michaels. Others would play that as a stopper as for no trump. I think that's actually relevant and useful, so I play it that way. But there are other situations where Leaping Michaels can come into play as well. Well, it's not necessarily always leaping, but a similar in principle at least. So after like a 3 club opening, for example, you can actually play like bidding 4 clubs as both majors, and you can play 4 diamonds as diamonds in a major. So partner can, bid 4 hearts in that situation to pass or correct. If it's not known what major suit it is, for example. You could also play something similar after 3 diamonds. Maybe you just flip the bids where 4 clubs, and some people call this non-leaping Michaels. 4 clubs is clubs in a major, and then 4 diamonds would be both majors. You can play something like that. It is important to, discuss with your partner whether you have those agreements in place or not, but it certainly is an option. All right. I'm kind of torn time-wise because I feel like we knocked out a good amount of information. And slam bidding does have a lot in it, so maybe what we'll do is we'll make that its own episode. And so this one might just be a little shorter as a result. But thank you guys for watching. This will be on YouTube shortly, and I will have the next part of this next week for those who want to tune in. But thank you so much.